In this video, we'll take our HTML framework that we've already created and start doing some styling using CSS or cascading style sheets. Now in the handout, I've already explained to you the basics of how CSS and style sheets work. So we can get right to creating our first style sheet and attaching it to our home page to style all those divs that we've created last week. So before I start working with CSS, I'm going to change my workspace in Dreamweaver just a little bit to make it easier to style my CSS very intuitively. Over on the right side, by default, you have the compacted right side column. I'm going to change that to expanded. And what that does is it gives more room to this side of the interface where the CSS designer lives. And the CSS designer is new in Dreamweaver CC, and it helps to visually format the widths, the heights, the background colors, the margin, the padding, all sorts of CSS properties in a very visual and very intuitive way. So this is what we're going to use. So let's start. This is our index.html page. I'm going to start by creating my style sheet and attaching it to this page first. So over on the CSS designer, under sources, I click plus, create a new CSS file. I give it the name style.css, and under add as, we're going to use link, not import, so that we can keep just one CSS file that will be linked to all the pages of our website. And then hit OK. Now this creates the CSS file and links it to the home page. And up here in the code, you can see this link tag has been inserted, which connects style.css, which is a style sheet, into the code of index.html. So my home page and my style sheet are now connected. So as far as styling my page goes, I'm going to start with the container, set the width, height, and alignment of my container first, and then proceed to some of the smaller divs. So I'm going to select my container. On the right side, go to style.css, just click it to highlight, and then scroll down here to selectors and add a selector. Now because I have my container div selected, Dreamweaver already guessed that this is what I want to style right now. So it chose hash container. The hash is used in front of the ID that we assign to the div, and that's how Dreamweaver selects or identifies this particular div in the style sheet. So I just click outside and then select my container. And on the right side, I can see all the styles, all the properties that I can apply to my container. First, let me show you in my Illustrator file. My entire layout here is designed at about 800 pixels wide. So I want my container to be 800 pixels wide, and I want it to be centered on the page, and I want it to be almost at the top, just about 15 pixels away from the top of the page. So now how do we translate this into CSS? Let us see. I go back to Dreamweaver, make sure I'm on my container, and on here on the right side under properties, there are different things that we can set. The first section is on layout, which contains width, height, margins, padding, positioning. The second section is on text, where you set the text color, fonts, and everything. Then you have borders, and then you have background colors. So I'm going to start with the layout. I'm going to set the width. Right now the width is set to auto because it hasn't been set by us. So I click on auto and set it to pixels because I want to specify the width of my container in pixels. I click PX and I type in 800. Now as soon as I do that, notice Dreamweaver resized my container div to 800 pixels. But it's sticking to the left side of my window. I would like it to be centered. Now an easy and reliable way to center your div is this neat little CSS trick using margins. Margins are usually used for defining the spacing outside of your div. You can have top margins, left margins, right margins, and bottom margins. But another way to use margin is to center a div on your page by going down to margin and setting the left and right margins to auto. And you'll notice as soon as I set my left and right margins to auto, Dreamweaver centers my container div. Now from the top, I need a margin of 15 pixels. So I come in here, set my top margin in pixels to 15. And there you go. So Dreamweaver has added the 15 pixels for me, and that's all I need at this point to style my container div. And every time we make changes to our style sheet, which affects our web page, we go to File and click Save All. Notice this saves my web page as well as my CSS file. So remember, when you're working with HTML and CSS at the same time, keep clicking Save All to update all your web pages as well as your style sheet.